This is the craziest curveball I've ever had as a dungeon master, which leads to the craziest story that I've ever told. So right off the top, disclaimer, there are no spoilers for Curse of Strahd in this video. Just about every aspect of my Curse of Strahd, I've taken creative liberties of twisting Strahd's entire roles and how I roleplay him in the first place and what goals that he has, different items that I've added into the game, and different entire monsters like an ancient white dragon that I also added into the game. So there's no worries if you're currently in a Curse of Strahd campaign or if you're about to run one. I have homebrewed the crap out of this thing to be unrecognizable. As far as the plot points, what lead to them actually being able to defeat Strahd, which is what this whole video is about, is how my players defeated Strahd von Zarovich. And throughout the story, there's definitely little bits and nuggets that you can take and use for your own Curse of Strahd games. You might like to add the white dragon in there, or not. You might add different ways to tweak and change Strahd or items and stuff, or lessons to learn and avoid for your own campaigns outside of this module. Here we go. I'm starting things right off about how they actually killed Strahd. I'm not going to save it to the end of the video and make you watch through the whole thing. I'm going to lead with it right now, tell you how they did it, and then we're going to break down how they even got there in the first place. Again, I'm going to speak vaguely, and a lot of different things I mention are all things I've added into the game, or could be in the game, or it could not be. Who knows? The player characters just stopped a massive ritual that was going to sacrifice a very key NPC in their journey, and this item that was also going to be destroyed. They were able to stop the ritual, save the NPC, collect this item, and this item specifically could emit sunlight. And in Barovia, in the world of Strahd, there is no light. It is gloom and doomy darkness the whole time. So this item that actually projects actual sunlight is actually really cool. And a bit of vampire lore that, again, I am making my own here, and this is not maybe how your dungeon master runs it or how you view this magic in general, but for myself, if you have light shining on a vampire and you strike them down and the light engulfs the actual spirity fog mist thing that comes out of the vampire, that they turn into this misty form. If light completely engulfs it, it dies, right? So if there's no sunlight, again, this is only actual true sunlight, not just light. So without sunlight, if a vampire is slain, it turns into its mist form and flies back to its coffin, regenerates itself, and he's back. Keep that in mind for later with this whole sunlight thing. So they had this big, huge win, big, huge victory in a very important location, and here comes Strahd on the rise. He comes in, lands, and this is my Dungeon Master perspective, the last meeting that they were going to have with Strahd before the end game. They've had a great relationship with Strahd. That's a whole nother conversation as far as this adversarial. He's almost like a mentor to them. He's trying to train them up to become stronger. That's a whole element that I've taken Strahd in a direction of, is he wants them to become stronger so they can push him and challenge him. And he wants to almost like groom them in this way as this authoritative figure. But now they're getting to a point where they're starting to get in his way, and they're starting to get to a strong enough point where they actually could fight him. Not yet, though. He's still much stronger than them. But here comes the part where Strahd's downfall starts to happen. They have connected with him through a long thing that I'll get into once I explain the breakdown of how this even came in to be in the first place. But this was, in my opinion, the last time they're going to meet him until they were going to part ways, and then the next time they see him would be the final time. Little did I know that this time was the final time, because through talking with him, they played to his ego. They played to this sense of power that he wants. Strahd has a goal, my version of Strahd, where he wants to become more powerful for lots of other reasons that don't have to do with just the sheer fact of wanting to become more powerful. And in my version, the domain of dread grows as Strahd's power grows, and he wants to expand the domain of dread, reaching back to his homeland, being able to revive his parent, lots of other things that he has in store, but he wants to become more powerful. Players tap into this. They learn about this through multiple times of talking with him and different research they've done about Strahd, reading books and other things, and they played to this. And that white dragon I talked about that I added into the far north near Kresk, I added a white dragon into the thing. I wanted to have a dragon in Curse of Strahd. Well, why not? You have a dragon in it. It'd be great. Little did I know the player characters would use this white dragon against Strahd, and you might start to see where this is going. The player characters start talking to Strahd about, well, if you want to be so strong, if you want to get more powerful, why not go fight that white dragon? If you fight that white dragon, that would be a challenge. Could you even fight a white dragon? Would you be able to even kill it? Now, yes, they're making checks here and there and different sort of persuasion, influencing type checks against him. They start to really get through to him to where he really starts to think, this dragon would pose a challenge. I would like to do this until we meet again. And he starts to leave. He starts to go. But they're like, wait, we want to watch. We want to see this thing. There's no way that can we watch this go down? And this is where I start to catch on. Wait a second. Are they trying to... So I simply thought that they were just going to use... There's a problem with this white dragon is causing problems in the area, and they're going to use Strahd to go kill it. Wow, they just killed a white dragon by convincing the BBEG to do it for them. Wow, props to you guys. But then I realized there's more at stake here. And this is when my spidey sense went off. Wait a second. Are they going to have the white dragon and Strahd show down and then jump and attack Strahd right after. And if you can kind of piece that together, props to you to see if you are a savvy player character, because that's what went down. So through some more talking and convincing and all of this, and they know Strahd so well from interacting and engaging with Strahd so much, they travel north to the area where the White Dragon's from, and they throw down. They bait the White Dragon out with all the different things they've learned about how to do that, and then Dragon and Strahd have a throwdown. And this also is a little mini behind the scenes moment. I wanted to do this as a Dungeon Master. I don't know if this ever happened for you guys, but if there's ever been a time where two things that the Dungeon Master controls fight each other, it's this weird moment where all the players around the table are just kind of watching you. It's almost like you're just playing with two toys, like, oh, what's going to be? So I didn't want it to be that. So I had the players roll for the dragon. Now, they didn't say what the dragon was doing, or I didn't give them a stat block for the dragon. It wasn't like that. I didn't go that far. But I described a cinematic battle between the Strahd and dragon, and I had 8 rounds, basically, to where I would roll for Strahd, they would roll for the dragon, and like cool cinematic moments would happen of the two fighting, these two titans fighting. It was super cool. I wrote down little notes for myself as far as different ways to express that story. Cool things that dragon would do, cool things that Strahd would do, and based on the rolls, I would just describe each of those things. It was a really cool, like, anime style Strahd versus a white dragon. Super epic. And I think the player characters were more connected to it because they were the ones rolling the dice, and they rolled really well. I just had them roll a flat D20. It was all flat D20 rolls because I was like, the Strahd and Dragon are pretty close as far as power goes. Strahd is stronger, but we're just going to keep the dice the same. And here we go. And also, no matter how the dice rolls went, Strahd was going to kill the dragon. But the only game they were playing here is how much damage did this dragon do to Strahd? That's the only thing that's up for grabs here. I'm not going to have Strahd, the dragon, kill Strahd. That's dumb. But man, oh man, were the players rolling high. On the flat D20 rolls, they were rolling higher than 15. Higher than 10 every time, higher than 15 most of the time, and it got down to the final roll and it was a 19 out of 20, and I was like, oh my gosh, this dragon is throwing down against Strahd. And I also role played it in the aspect of Strahd being a little bit cocky, looking over to the players and like smiling as he like allowing the dragon to hit him and him just going back at it and just really showcasing the true power of Strahd. Also, let me say during this that my player characters, as soon as they left from the moment, as soon as we had little role play things and the travel and the time, they were all texting each other in their secret group message, not testing each other like those stereotypical players, like, oh, what am I, like not in a bored way. They were texting each other secretly to each other amongst the table. And I knew what was coming. Because they had a secret plan to do this whole thing and have this whole thing go off. And as soon as I describe, the dragon drops, hits the floor, and he looks over to the group, smiles, and starts to kind of like fix back his, his ensemble and kind of prestidigitate the blood off of him and stuff, and kind of like, oh, this is what I'm capable, and start to just talk about how awesome he is. They like looked at each other now, and they pulled the trigger and jumped on Strahd. We rolled for initiative, and they threw down against Strahd right after he took down this dragon. So basically, I had Strahd outside of his lair, and he was past half health, just past half health. That was where I put I was either going to have him be kind of hurt or like, okay, he's bloodied. Wow. Okay, cool. And they got him down up to a decently low spot, and the fight started. Even now, they needed things to go pretty well for them as far as this goes. And the story goes is they jumped him, they attacked him, they used all of their features and abilities together. And the one player character that had that one medallion that has the sunlight, that can emit sunlight, Strahd tried to hold person him. Because he knew that he had that item, he could see it, and he was basing his entire strategy around keeping that person there just in case he did fall, he could escape. And he held person, resisted, held person again with some legendary actions and other things that I have for Strahd stat block. If you guys are interested in some of the ways of how I've ran Strahd, or you want my Strahd stat block or how that whole thing works, let me know, leave comments, because I ran this whole thing, which we'll get into later. But the player keeps resisting. Felix the rogue keeps resisting. Every hold person is able to break out of it and break free. And another cool thing about the player that happens to be holding this medallion, they can shapeshift into a bird. And what they did was shapeshift into a bird, holding the grasps of the sunlight medallion in their talons as it emits light as they fly over towards Strahd. As the rest of the player characters use magic to weaken him and use a paladin's smite with a very special sword as they swing through and cleave down Strahd. And as Strahd's spirit forms and wisps together and starts to leave, we start to realize, wait a second, they could kill Strahd right now, 20 sessions early, estimated by my estimations. 20 sessions early. The player characters are only level 8. and they are about to kill Strahd. Wait a second, guys. We had to stop. I've never done this before. I had a timeout at the table. I was like, stop. Guys, do y'all realize what's about to happen? And they're like, yeah, this is wild. And I was like, I really think we should stop. And is this where our campaign ends? Is this, as Felix the rogue shapeshifted into the bird from the were-raven, lycanthropy features he has, he's flying towards Strahd with the sunlight medallion. Strahd's turning into mist to fly away, and we crunched the numbers on it, and we're like, Felix would be able to catch up to Strahd. Like, we did all the movement extrapolations and everything. He'd be able to do it. This is wild. And then we had a conversation. We had a real timeout meta conversation. Do we end the campaign here? Do you guys want to end the campaign here? This all came out of nowhere. This all was kind of wild and crazy, but I didn't want them to end the campaign. This is another little, random group tip here, is I didn't want them to end the campaign and then be like, oh, well, I really wanted to go into the castle. I wanted my character and all these other things, So we had to stop. That was the end of the session. We literally ended the session there and just kind of had a talk. And I was like, everybody's going to think about it, go separately. I'm going to talk to everybody individually. And then the overall consensus and the couple of days leading after that was like, yeah, this is a wild story. This is our story to tell. This is how the story unfolds. And I'll break it down more in just a little bit, but it was the perfect ending for this group that engaged with the story in this way, that engaged with Strahd in this way, to even be able to have any of this be possible, with all the dice going their way and having certain things like the dice telling the story of the dragon doing so well to weaken him so much, Felix being able to break through these multiple hold persons that he's flying through. It's because if any of those hold persons landed, if any one of the three of them or so landed, this wouldn't have been possible and Strahd would have escaped. But everything going the way it did, their choices plus the dice told the story. And as we came back to this top of the next session, we described the fall of Strahd, of how the light engulfs him and he fades into mist and truly dies. Now, I also have a thing here, and this part is my own take. I'm not going to speak to what the actual campaign module is. I'm not going to talk about that. Again, no spoilers. This is my own take. But the domain of dread actually lifts and is gone, and it evaporates and fades because Strahd was the anchor and the beacon for all of that darkness that was all tied around him. His power expanded the domain of dread further, and him being the source and anchor of all of that released everything and released the domain of dread, and he did truly die. So a wild story, the craziest moment in my Dungeon Master history as far as what player characters are able to accomplish, but man oh man did it make so much sense. And kind of what I alluded to a little bit, so to break it down just a little bit more, is the player characters really connected to Strahd so much. Specifically, Pug the Paladin stood up to Strahd, and they figured out the ways in which I had Strahd built as far as from a roleplay perspective. Again, taking my own stance entirely and leaving the core module take on Strahd behind. Strahd's relationship with the player characters was to find people to make him be able to be more powerful. Imagine my analogy would be if you were the world's best boxer and you were trapped in a world full of children that aren't boxers. How would you ever become better? You can only train against a punching bag so much. You would need to find the ones that stand out. To find the ones that are, this kid could turn into a real, let me train you. And then you would train up a group of people to be strong enough to be able to push you again. So that is Strahd's strange, dark mentor relationship with the player characters. He tests them and puts them through trials and tribulations, making them stronger so he can become stronger. Times where he's thrown them under the bus, times where he's saved them. There's literally a time where there's a group of 3 spellcaster people that were about to kill the player characters, and he literally saved them. Also forging a pact with one of the player characters in response, which was another cool thing, that one of the player characters had a pact with Strahd. Again, further showing their connection that these player characters had with Strahd. They knew what made him tick, sometimes on accident by standing up to him, saying that they're going to take him down. He loved that. He loved the boldness. He loved the brash. He loved them being brave in the face of fear. And as the player characters got stronger, they became more of a nuisance and then more impressed by Strahd. He still was more powerful and did what he wanted to in certain other aspects, but it was really cool to see that relationship grow. They had certain times where they would go and ask about the lore of Strahd, talk with Strahd at the dinner table and learn about his past, his history, ask other NPCs, other people in the world about the history of Strahd. And only through that curiosity did they learn and glean enough information to know what made him tick, to know that he wanted these certain things. things and to be able to play onto that. And if they did not know those things from their hard work and engagement with the story and Strahd himself, they would not have been able to tap into those things to even propose him to go kill that white dragon. And if I didn't even put the white dragon in the story in the first place, that wouldn't have even been there at all. So many things had to fall in line and fall in place for this story to unfold, but my God, was it beautiful and awesome. And man, did we have that next session, the entire session of a wrap up of how this whole thing played out, each of their character arcs playing. We finished off, we had another session of just the wrap up, which you always should do in a campaign, just to make sure all the characters finish their story arcs and see where they all go. So if any of this interests you, however well this video does, I can do more stuff on my take on Strahd and the Curse of Strahd module and the different ways I've done a whole bunch. If you know anything about me and my homebrew self, this was a huge thing for me, and I took a lot of homebrew directions that I think honestly did improve the game. And this honestly was also my salute and farewell to D&D 5e and running a module system, because now I am doing DC 20, as a lot of y'all already know. So if you're interested in seeing more about Curse of Strahd and how I did it, let me know, and I'll of course have some videos on that and make some content. But if you really want to see the entire behind the scenes intricate reworkings of what I've done, I have an entire Dungeon Master binder available on Patreon, and in the future it will be available on my website as well, but the links for that will be down in the description. It is my entire Dungeon Master binder for how I ran the entire game. Probably the largest, most amount of like Dungeon Master content in one bundle that I've ever had before. It is a full blown, you could run the entire game from scratch from there. I'm going to have a video that talks about it, also linked in the whole thing. Right now it's a reward for Metallic Dragon patrons, and as you also, as a Metallic Dragon patron, get access to the full alpha of DC 20. So there's a bunch of rewards all baked into that, but then once it is available on the website, it'll be separated. I'll have all the links down there. I really did love having my final farewell to D&D being Curse of Strahd. It seems very iconic in that way. Even just running a module, I took a lot of notes of how I would do modules in different ways, like I've done in my Dungeon Master binder, to like truly let you be able to run it out of the book and be able to what kind of struggles I had doing, because there's plenty of things I could probably do, lots of rants on how modules should be organized. But stay tuned for that with all the stuff there with DC 20. So anyway, I hope this was helpful and an insight, or maybe even just an entertaining story to see how everything ends up going down. My take on Curse of Strahd. So until next time, stay creative, think outside the box. Peace.